Hey, Dirt Rich listeners, it's Katie. Before Jared starts the show, I want to highlight an upcoming event we have with today's guest, Dayna Burtness. On August 21st, the Sustainable Farming Association will be hosting, get ready for this alliteration here, a Methods of Pastured Pork and Poultry Production field day at Nettle Valley Farm and Wholesome Family Farms in southeastern Minnesota. This field day is free and open to all, and Jared and I will be there too. Be sure to register so we can make sure that we'll get you a lunch. And the link is in the show notes. And of course, it's also on the SFA website event calendar and on our soil health page too. So if you'd like to learn more after what you hear on today's episode, be sure to check out those details and maybe we'll see you there.
Hey there, and welcome to Dirt Rich, seasonal conversations about food and farming. I'm Jared Luhman, the soil health lead for the Sustainable Farming Association. Today we're going to have a discussion with Dayna Burtness. Dayna was actually one of the first farms that I was able to visit when I came on board with SFA, and I was just so impressed with the work she's doing at building a pastured pork production and marketing enterprise while really focusing on soil health. She also prioritizes helping beginning farmers get into the business by opening up her farm as an incubator farm. There's a ton of really awesome things happening down in Spring Grove, Minnesota at Dayna's farm, and I'm looking forward to hearing about them today. So Dayna, welcome to the Dirt Rich podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you setting some time out of your busy schedule to talk to me. But before we get into really the details of your operation, maybe give a brief overview of your farm, and then I'd love to hear about your history as to how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, yeah, like you said, I'm Dayna Burtness. My husband, Nick Nguyen, and I run Nettle Valley Farm. We are a pastured pig-centric farm. We've got our land base is about 70 owned acres and then about 10 rented acres down in southeastern Minnesota near Spring Grove. And yeah, we started with 3 pigs sort of on a whim a few winters, 7 years ago, I guess.
Time flies.
And have grown, time flies. And this year we'll be finishing 75 mixed breed heritage hogs on pasture, specifically using the wagon wheel hub model of pasturing pigs. And like you mentioned, we also run an incubator farm program. We're just finishing up our 3rd year of that program and looking forward to welcoming a new group of incubatees next year if we find folks who'd be a good fit. And I guess other enterprises, I wouldn't call it an enterprise, but we do maintain a small flock of pastured egg layers that we keep ourselves in eggs and then also hard boil and then freeze all the eggs for pig training treats.
Nice.
But that's sort of the scoop. That's us in a nutshell.
Awesome. And then going back to your history, so you said you started this off 7 years ago. You didn't really start or come from a hog production system. Tell me about how you got to this, where you are now as far as location and doing what you're doing.
Yeah, quite the opposite. I grew up in the suburbs of the Twin Cities in Coon Rapids. I always like to tell people I didn't even learn how to mow a lawn until I was 19, which is sort of embarrassing, but I share that because I want to make sure that other people who didn't grow up on farms know that it's hard, but you can get into it. My path to farming has been sort of a long and winding road. On a whim, I did a farm internship when I was 19 at Foxtail Farm and just totally fell in love with veggie farming. And so when I went back after my freshman year of college, I went back to school and started a student farm. After graduating, I did sort of a detour through the nonprofit world. I worked at a farmer's market and a food policy think tank. But the whole time I just really wanted to get back into farming. So did a few enterprises with vegetable farming. So I ran a small peri-urban market garden out in Minnetonka, and then did a couple years of wholesale veggie farming in Northfield, Minnesota. But then I got a really bad case of Lyme disease, and I actually had to quit farming for a couple of years. Around that time is when I started learning about permaculture, restoration agriculture, regenerative agriculture, and realized that sort of, my energy levels for the rest of my life are probably going to be limited. I'm never going to have that 20-something vegetable farming energy anymore. Those days are done.
Sure.
But realized that broadacre pastured livestock farming was something that matched up with my new interests and my new energy levels. And about that time, we started looking for a farm to call our own. And actually, I'm the 6th generation in my family to farm in Houston County. So basically, ever since at least on my dad's side, since they got off the boat from Norway, they've lived in this area of the state. And so I felt like we had a connection here, and the Driftless area is gorgeous. And we got really lucky. We were able to find a bank and then get some FSA financing to buy 70 acres of raw land down here and made a go of it. It really helps that my husband works off the farm full time. I'm sort of the main farmer. But yeah, I guess that was 2015. I should have these dates memorized, but the main takeaway is that we haven't been here all that long, but we're starting to sort of get a good foundation, getting to learn the land. And like I said, we started with 3 pigs and have grown since then.
So when did Nick come into the picture, and what was his thoughts on the farming enterprise, or the potential of being a farmer?
Yeah, thanks Match.com. I met Match, or Nick and I met on Match.com when I was still living in the city and in Minneapolis and doing the nonprofit thing.
Sure.
And at that point, I was actually trying to start Minnesota's first commercial scale rooftop farm. And so I guess when Nick met me, I was already sort of talking about farming, just still thinking about urban farming.
So he knew what he was getting into, or he had an idea anyway.
Kind of, he knew what he. Yeah. But he's lucky. His current job is fully remote. He's a computer guy, and so he can do his work from anywhere. But no, he's just kind of game. He's one of those people. Have you met him?
I don't know that I have. I'm not sure that I have.
Okay. He's just he just loves life, is always looking he just like really does what there is to do. Nick is like took to country living really, really well. He loves all the fresh air. He loves being able to come out of his basement office and help me move fence for an hour, or, catch a pig that needs some antibiotics or something, and then go back down and return to his super cerebral job. So I think he really loves it. I asked him the other day if I died, would he go back to living in Minneapolis? And he was like, "No, I don't think so. I think I'd just stay out here." So I think he really likes it.
That's awesome. Would he keep the hog operation going? I'm just curious now. You got
no.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't. That's really my deal. Like, he loves it, and he's just as much of a farmer as I am. Like, we could not run our farm without our teamwork. Like, he does all the sort of underappreciated stuff. Like, he does all the bookkeeping and the taxes, and he's my, right-hand man whenever it comes to a job that really needs 2 people. Sure. But it's not his passion.
Yeah.
It's really my passion.
No, that's awesome. And I can tell, just having visited you and talked, it is a passion. And so let's talk a little bit more about that then, the production side. You started off raising, you talked about your wagon wheel, which I want you to explain a little bit in just a bit, but you started off not in the wagon wheel pastured pork production model. How did you start raising hogs? If I recall correctly, you started in the woods in the valley, and why did you switch to the method you're raising them now?
Yeah, so it doesn't really have a name like the wagon wheel hub model, but I guess sort of the standard pasturing pig idea is that pigs need a lot of infrastructure to support them. So it's not just like a ruminant where you've got some water and some mineral where you schlep around. Pigs need, they've got their grain supplement, they've got their water, they've got, they need a lot of shade, a lot of shelter, they've got their fencing. So before we would, when we got started with 10 pigs, we actually just had all of their stuff surrounded by an electric fence, and then would move all of that stuff every week. But we were noticing that there's just, pigs are like little rototillers, as many of your listeners will know. There's just a lot of disturbance anytime you have pigs. And we noticed that there was just way too much disturbance for our tastes. We were trying to be a soil health focused farm. And I noticed, especially around where their feeders were, around their waterers, especially where they tried to make wallows. There was just too much compaction and disturbance. And I noticed that in certain areas, the soil health was getting worse, not better. And that's not what we're about. Especially when, we have a forecast of 5 days of rain. When you're using that sort of standard model, you don't have the ability to take the pigs off of pasture. And especially in a newer, more newly developed pasture where there isn't that nice thick sod layer, they can just liquefy a pasture in a couple of hours. So it's not just a matter of, just keep them moving. Well, okay, when you've had 5 days of rain and they've liquefied the pasture, well, all right, how are you going to move the feeder in the water without getting your tractor in there and just compacting the soil? And then as far as just handling facilities too, it's just really tough to scale. In my opinion, it's really tough to scale when you're fully on pasture. I know people do it.
And that is a real challenge. I mean, I imagine we see that sometimes even with cattle, with the rainfall, it's a challenge. But additionally, your environment and your context, it was a hillside with a lot of woods and brush and shrubs, which makes it difficult to get in. And a lot of just the context of your area and your land base makes that even more of a challenge, I would imagine.
Exactly. Yes. The 70 acres we own, our little valley has, like 1.5 acres of tillable out of the whole thing. It's mostly wooded hillsides. And then the valley bottom is somewhat flat, open pasture. But no, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I do miss being in the woods because the pigs are woodland creatures. I mean, they love shade. They love to root around and eat all the different grubs and roots, and they loved the diversity of getting to eat what was in the woods. But farming, what else is livestock farming but sort of a dance and a balance between farmer happiness, livestock happiness, and soil health happiness. And sometimes prioritizing, if we were only focused on pig happiness, I think we might end up going back to that model because there's nothing better than pigs being able to roam freely in the woods. But that's not necessarily what the woods need. And then when it comes time to weighing pigs or loading pigs, that's not necessarily maximum farmer happiness either. So that's where we've sort of transitioned to the wagon wheel hub.
Yeah. And talk about that a little bit. What does that look like?
Yeah, so the wagon wheel hub idea is that you have sort of like a wagon, old-timey wagon wheel. You've got the central hub and then the spokes all around it. So what that looks like in a pasture pig operation is a central either barn or fenced-in sacrifice area where their food and their water, their wallow ends up staying as sort of a sacrifice area. And then you use electronet to make pasture paddock hubs or spokes around that hub. In our context with our land, it ends up being more of a hot air balloon because the basket of the hot air balloon is where we turned an old hay shed into their sort of central hub area, and then all their pasture paddocks stretch out to the north. So we're grazing 75 pigs, well, currently 80 pigs on a little over 8 acres of rented tillable land. Our farm is very weird. Our 70-acre valley is cut off from our actual 3-acre homestead. We have the most confusing property lines in Houston County. So our neighbors who own the farmland that surrounds our little homestead have been kind enough to rent us a chunk of land that connects our homestead to our valley.
Sure.
So if it's dry enough and it's a good enough acorn year, my plan is to flash graze the pigs down in the valley to get the acorns. But yeah, generally we have a 28 by 72 hay shed that we have 2 feeders that stay in place and then some automatic Smidley waterers. And then we do a mix of deep bedding and then just sort of a light dusting of bedding depending on what the pigs want. And then the pigs either graze right around the wagon wheel hub, or we make them a laneway under that electric netting. And their paddocks are generally 1/2 acre to 3/4 of an acre at a time.
And how long or how often are you moving them through paddocks? How long are they staying on paddocks? And
Yeah, it totally depends on their size, soil moisture, the forage that's available in there, but generally no longer than a week.
so that you just brought up something that I hadn't even considered is the forage that's in there. What is your forage base that you're using and grazing them on? Annuals, perennials, and species. I guess you can get as specific as you want, but what does the forage base look like?
Oh, it's just it's a constant experiment. Every year we're trying something a little different.
Sure.
Right now, the 7-8 acres is divided into 4 chunks. There's a perennial hay strip that was existing before we started renting the land. Right now, about the third of the remaining tillable is a warm season annual mix that has sunflowers, buckwheat, teff, phacelia, or how do you say that? Phacelia, whatever.
Celia, I think is how I've heard it called, but I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's one of those words I've only read. We played around on the green cover seed smart mix
Sure.
calculator and made a really fun, diverse mix that we planted. And it's just gorgeous. I love it. I love being out there and seeing all the sunflowers and seeing all the pollinators on the buckwheat. I have yet to graze the pigs on it. We'll see how they do.
Sure.
And then the other 2/3 of the rest of that tillable field is a mix of lots of clovers, small grains, grazing greens, that's what we call dwarf Essex rape. They love, grazing greens or grazing kale. Just dwarf Essex rape is such a gross name. They just needs a rebrand.
Right.
Definitely needs a rebrand.
So the hogs they enjoy like forbs and brassicas is a preference of them you've seen then?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
They love it. I'd say their number one thing that they love to eat is actually dandelions.
Yeah.
That is bar none their favorite thing to eat as far as a forage goes. And then they're really loving clovers, any kind of clover. White clover they do seem to root up quite a bit. And they will take some bites of grasses. Right now we've got a lot of forage chicory that's huge. It's 4 or 5 feet tall and in bloom, and they strip all the lower leaves off of it. And we're hoping that we get a lot of reseeding going with that. One thing I've noticed, we did an experiment where we planted a bunch of small grains to let them mature and hog down, and they get pretty excited about barley and oats, but they will not show much excitement about wheat and rye. So we learned that there. We feed them free choice, unlimited 24/7 mix of peas and barley, a certified organic pea and barley feed. And so going forward, I think we'll just focus on lush, fresh forages as opposed to trying to have them hog down many of the sort of like grains, just because, I don't know, omnivore stomach doesn't necessarily digest whole grains all that well. And so I think we're going to just in the future prioritize nutrients over calories in our forage mixes and other benefits like soil health and pollinators and other things.
Well, that's just awesome that you're able to observe that. I mean, that's something we try to talk to whenever I'm working with farmers is the power of observation and seeing what's happening out there and what your livestock prefer and preferences so that you can manage accordingly. If you weren't paying attention, you would have continued to potentially plant something that wasn't maybe being utilized to its fullest. And now you can choose and pick and choose your mixes based on what your animals are preferring.
Another thing we really target for our forage mixes is, so we have pigs on the farm. We're finish only, so we don't farrow. So we get pigs from June and they stay on the farm through November. So there's quite a few species in our forage mixes that end up actually going to seed before their main pasture season of July. And so that's another thing that we prioritize is trying to get a bunch of stuff that's going to either overwinter and then go to seed right in the spring so that we don't actually have to reseed much of anything. We're sort of trying to think like a weed and really loading up the soil seed bank with a bunch of seeds that will germinate when the time is right. And so cut down on our cover crop seed bill.
That's fascinating. So you're doing an annual seeding mix without needing the annual seeding. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We definitely still frost seed and tweak things, but we're definitely like building up that flywheel in the seed bank.
Oh, that's so cool. How has this then compared to how you started off? How would you say it's improved your quality of life, your soil health management, the pig's quality of life? How has it affected everything? I know you mentioned if you were purely pig focused, you maybe would have carried on in the way you were doing it before. But how has this switch to the wagon wheel system changed your business model and your operation?
Hardly a day goes by where I don't just thank my lucky stars that we had the infrastructure and the ability to switch over to this model. I mean, when you have just a giant storm coming in, or if you've got 5 days of rain in the forecast, or you've got a sick pig, or even something as simple as when you need to weigh all the pigs to make sure that they're growing and monitor their parasite load, just having that infrastructure in place helps me really sleep at night soundly and know that, okay, if I wake up and I check all the pigs and somebody has a limp or somebody's got an injury, I can, like Nick and I can go out with the sort boards and really quickly isolate it into the chute and give it the veterinary attention that it needs.
Mm-hmm.
We did that. We tried doing all those things fully on pasture for 4 years, 5 years. And it just the stress levels or just in the middle of a really windy night thinking like, oh God, a tree is going to fall on the fence and all the pigs are going to get out. Just knowing that I can close them in at night and just sleep really soundly and then let them back out in the morning. Or when the pastures are too wet, be able to enclose them either fully just into the shed, or we have a little space called the lobby that's still a sacrifice area, but at least that they get fresh air and sunshine. They can run around and root around in wood chips and
Sure.
straw. And I'd say just collecting more data about the pigs has been a lot easier. So for instance, now on the side of the wagon wheel hub, we've got a chute that runs through a scale. And so every 2 weeks, we run every single pig through the scale so we can track average daily gains and how that's comparing to how much food they're eating.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes time to load them up and take them in for their one bad day, they're already used to walking through that chute. And so we just open a gate and they walk right onto the trailer.
Sure.
So it's one thing to have 10 pigs fully on pasture, but when you get to our scale with 75, 80 pigs, it's just a different thing entirely. So it's been really wonderful. And then we do get all that wonderful composted bedding from the deep bedded pack. That's been really great to spread on the fields or build new perennial garden beds out of it. And
yeah, I bet that's an awesome asset. And so that kind of leads into the next part of this whole switch is the soil health part. First of all, you have that nutrient resource that you can help build soil health on. But as far as the pasture management and stuff too, how has that improved the pasture?
Just way less compaction. Yeah. I mean, every time, like I mentioned earlier, pigs have so much stuff. And so if you added up the square footage of all the really compacted areas in any given paddock, so the really compacted areas around their water, around their feeder, under their shade structure, in their wallow, it ends up being considerable. And so just being able to eliminate that. Plus, I mean, the pigs are grazing on rented land right now, and I don't want to have our landlord come out and see just a deeply pockmarked, compacted field. I want to be a good renter.
Sure.
Yeah, just being able to more finely tune the rotation. So before you'd really have to, it'd be pretty tough to be able to hopscotch around or skip around in the field, depending on where the forage is best. Generally, we do sequential grazing right now. So just the pigs graze the next area after the previous paddock. But if I wanted to, I could close them into the wagon wheel hub, make a brand new laneway to a brand new section of the field, which actually I'm considering doing. I'm considering doing a test flash graze of the warm season annual mix. I didn't really want them to hit that too hard until September, when more of the species in there are, like the sunflowers, are mature. But just for fun, I was thinking about doing a test paddock in there just to see, like, okay, how does this regrow? Everything is just a constant experiment around here.
Yeah.
But it would be tough to do that with we need a name for this, just like the standard pasturing, fully pastured pig model. I don't know. We'll workshop that.
Sure. Yeah. No, I look forward to it. The experimenting is definitely something that I guess I gathered when I was there is that you're willing to try and always trying new things. I think when I was there, you were experimenting with wood chips over straw or something, and as a bedding
Yep.
source. And it's always something new, which is what we need, especially in a field like this, that there's not that much resources maybe available for, which is why we're trying to do this podcast, is get some of the information out. So of all the things that you've experimented with and the different trials you've done, what are, if you were to give a couple of nuggets of wisdom to somebody who might be starting this out, some don't do this, or, this might work, it didn't work for us questions, any kind of insights that you've gathered in your years of experimentation?
Well, one failed experiment this year, and then one just like big struggle that we're having. This year we're going to make a pig spa. So I really don't like wallows. Pigs can't sweat. And so they really do need a lot of shade and a lot of moisture to be able to cool off, especially on these 90-degree days. So last year they had a wallow that was big enough to fit, 60 of them. And that was just huge. And within a couple days, it just got disgusting. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't happy with the smell. I wasn't happy with the compaction. I mean, they basically make a little like pond.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can use that to your advantage if you want a pond, but if you don't want a pond somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so we got rid of that. And then this year I built a little chute over to another building that we have on the farm that has a concrete floor. And I was going to just put sprinklers in there so they could still cool off, but not dig a pit.
Sure.
But immediately when I had that, I was going to make it a free choice thing, just have a sprinkler on a timer and let the pigs sort of self-select about what they wanted to be doing, if they wanted to be on their bedding or in the spa or out on pasture. Jared, they immediately turned it into a toilet.
Okay. Sure.
So that was not ideal because poop on concrete without any bedding equals smell and flies. Mm-hmm. And so pretty quickly I was like, well, okay, this is not making me happy. Mm-hmm. So we kind of axed that idea. So sure. I'm still trying to experiment with ways that pigs can get what they need, which is the ability to cool off without a giant wallow.
Sure.
And so this year, when we switch to the automatic waters, I do have to clean them out every day, and that makes sort of a pool along the edge of the shed. And so they do seem to be liking to sit in that moist area that's just concrete near their waters. So I think we've figured out a happy medium. Sure. I go and check on them during the hottest days, and as long as they have plenty of shade, they seem to be, nobody's exhibiting signs of heat stress. Sure. So I'm thinking that might just be the way to go. Another challenge that we're having is still flies. I haven't really dialed in my fly management as far as the challenge with the deep bedded pack is that it starts composting and it puts out just an extraordinary amount of heat. And I just don't want that heat radiating up from the bottom of the shed already in the season. When it's 90 degrees, I do not want it to be 100 degrees, 2 inches down in the bedding. Yeah. And so right now the experiment, our wagon wheel hub, the pig shed is divided into 3. And so in one third, I've got a deep bedded pack going that I haven't cleaned out. I've just been adding more bedding. In the middle, I've got just concrete. And then in the southern third, I've got more of a dusting of straw. Okay. And I've just been watching and observing where they self-select and like to hang out. And so I've got a wireless remote solar powered camera in the barn so I can check on them in person, but then throughout the day, just trying to notice trends about where they're liking to be and then how that correlates with the weather too.
Sure.
But I'm just noticing that, fly or poop and pee plus bedding equals perfect fly habitat. And I've visited other farms that use deep bedding or, have free range hogs, but not pasture. And they just don't seem to have the same fly issues. So I have not figured that out yet. So if any of your listeners want to give me some coaching on fly management, I mean, we've got fly predators going, we've got fly traps, we've got fly paper, and still it's just too many flies for me. Positive experiments though, I guess just the really diverse paddocks and letting lots of forages go to seed and then reseeding themselves. That's been a really successful experiment that I really love.
Yeah.
And actually planting forages that they don't necessarily like when they're non-vegetative, and then letting those go to seed, and then for a second grazing the vegetative state. That's been good. So like the small grains, they're the ones that they're not necessarily loving when they're mature, but then as they move through and they root around and trample things, that plants it for the second graze where they can come back through and eat those. Well, one we were going to do this year, we were going to do a trial with Practical Farmers of Iowa on deworming solutions. We were going to divide the pigs into three. One third was going to be no deworming. One was going to be the Swinex from Dr. Paul's lab, the all-natural one, and then one was going to be ivermectin. But our feeder pigs, we had a contract that they were all supposed to be a minimum of 80 pounds when they arrived. But when they arrived, some of them were as small as like 40 pounds. And so we just have no wiggle room this year on getting them to size up before slaughter. So we're looking to do that again next year, because parasites are definitely an Achilles heel of pasturing pigs.
Sure. Well, maybe talk on the other health benefits, health concerns of this system that you've developed compared to maybe what you were doing before. Have you seen any other observations as far as health, things that work, things that don't?
I have noticed that the pigs definitely get bored and are unhappy when I do have to close them into the wagon wheel hub for a few days at a time, because they're so used to being out and being able to frolic around and eat fresh greens. And as we all know, pigs are very smart and they do get bored really easily. And so I have been finding myself this year maybe letting them out just a little sooner than maybe I quote unquote should, just because, that pig happiness has been winning out. And I also noticed more coughs and sneezes developing when they have to be in the wagon wheel hub for too long. Although when they have to be in the wagon wheel hub for too long, it's usually because there's been some sort of extreme weather, and that can really set off respiratory issues with pigs as well. So I'm trying to suss out, is it that they're closed in, or is it that they're, there's been a huge temperature shift? Just being able to monitor each pig really carefully as far as their weight goes. I'd love to be able to weigh them every week, but that just ends up taking, half a day every week, and that's a bit too much. But being able to weigh them every other week, that data is super helpful. One simple benefit of the pig shed wagon wheel hub model is noticing who's down. So if I go out in the morning and everybody is out on pasture except one pig that's laying down, I mean, that's a red flag right there. Like, okay, I need to take a rectal temp. I need to maybe isolate this pig. Whereas when they're fully on pasture, it's much harder to notice that. I'm noticing, if a pig is just laying down on pasture, that doesn't necessarily tell you anything. But if it's completely away from its buddies, which it's not a big deal when you have 10, because you can examine each one of them multiple times a day. But when you have 75, 80, it's much harder. So I really like that.
No, that's a great point. Being able to just see them. I mean, it's one of the benefits we have of moving cattle daily. We roll up a fence and they run right by us, all of them, every day, as opposed to spread out all over a pasture. I mean, it's easier to see unusual behaviors when you get into a pattern and one is no longer following that pattern.
Absolutely. Which I guess if we were moving pigs every day, we could do that. But man, fully pigs on pasture, I guess some people do attempt that, but I was never able to figure that. I mean, they just aren't ruminants. A lot of people try to treat pigs like ruminants, and they just aren't. Yeah. They just aren't. They're not migratory animals necessarily. Like I'm no wild pig expert, but as far as I know, like they like to have smaller social groups and have sort of home bases that they move in between. Yeah. I'm sure I'm going to get some email from a swine expert, from a feral hog expert, and say that that's not true. But I do think they like to have a home base that they can come back to and snuggle into, and then be able to move to fresh pasture.
No, that's a good point too. And I'm not sure, do they have daily routines where in the morning, like at night in the morning, they're in the shed, and then first thing sun's coming up, they're going outside, that even though you're maybe not controlling the routine like we are with our fence, that they still have a routine because of the system that you're able to observe differences in?
Oh, absolutely. They have such a routine. Kind of depends on the weather. But yeah, like I said, I have that camera in the pig shed.
Yeah.
So when I wake up, sometimes I wake up at like 3 a.m., 5 a.m. That's the first thing I do. I check the pigs to see what they're doing. And it seems like right as the sun is coming up, or maybe even a little early, they all wake up, head out to pasture, spend, depending on the temperature, an hour or two out there. And then as it gets hotter, they all come back in and then spend the rest of the day, excuse me, especially when it's hot, pretty much spend the rest of the day in the shed snoozing.
Sure.
They'll wake up, take a stretch break, have a snack, drink some water, and then go right back to sleep. But then right around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, that's when they all start heading out to pasture again.
Yeah.
And they're not herd animals, but they are definitely social creatures who have experience a lot of peer pressure. And so if some of them start heading out, then the rest of them usually do end up following. And so I do like that they can self-select.
I'm a little jealous of that lifestyle. Yeah, I mean, wake up, go out to pasture, come in, take a nap, eat a snack. Gosh, that sounds like the dream retirement someday.
Seriously.
Yeah.
They live such a good life. We always joke about how they eat better than most Americans because their carbs and protein, their feed, their pea and barley feed is certified organic, and it's got organic apple cider vinegar in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then their pasture is super diverse. And I don't know if it would qualify as certified organic or not, but if it would be certifiable or not. But then also we have a partnership with Featherstone Farm where every week we go and pick up anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple thousand pounds of their pig quality organic vegetables. So they get to feast on organic vegetables. And then our friends have an organic orchard. And so we get their organic apples, and then we go and glean fields and for more vegetables and go to people's farms and glean their home orchards. So, I mean, that's pretty deluxe. And then they get organic pastured hard-boiled eggs. It's like ridiculous.
Yep, they eat better than me, I'm sure. The lifestyle and quality of feed is better than me. That's awesome. I want to talk about marketing a little bit. We're running out of time, so I will direct all of our people to, we did a webinar with you last winter, fall, sometime. I don't even remember. And so on the SFA YouTube channel, there's a webinar where Dayna is on. I don't even remember the name. I should have looked it up earlier. Something along the lines of direct marketing, meat-based products or something. And we had a couple other farmers on it. So check that out. But would you mind giving a brief high-level overview of how you've built your market, some of the tips and tricks that you found to be really successful in building out a direct market for your pork?
Yeah, start small, have really, really, really good meat. Go after that super primo flavor profile that people are going to rave about, because then they'll tell their friends and family. And so, like I said, we started with 3 and have gradually we went from 3 to 10 to 25 to 40 to 50 to 73 and now 75. And so that gradual growth curve has helped us find new customers slowly each year, maintain a fun, vibrant social media presence. I mean, what we do is super photogenic, and people love pig videos. People love getting to know you as a person. So just be yourself, be your weird, quirky self on social media. Other than that, we've tried paid advertising in the past, like in the various directories and stuff, and that really hasn't gotten us all that many customers. Mostly it's just people telling their friends and family.
Sure.
We try to do nice little touches, like send postcards. We usually give them a gift at the end of the year, like a set of custom paintings that we have done of our pigs as note cards.
That's awesome.
Just try to make people feel appreciated. And then, just our approach has just been raise the absolute best of the best that we know how to do, and then charge really premium prices. And within that premium, it with as long as you have a good profit margin, it gives you that flexibility to go the extra mile of doing all the other fun, pays for your time to do the social media, pays for your time to pay more attention to your customers. Yeah, we just try to, we couldn't do what we do without our amazing customers. And so we try to behave thusly.
Yeah. That is an interesting point that I want to talk about too, is the pricing. Because when I talk to people starting out direct marketing businesses, they're a lot of times going to, okay, well, the store is worth this. So, I can, even at a Whole Foods or at a local thing or whatever, grass-based, this is the price. And I need to compete with that. They have this thing in their mind that they feel the need to compete with these. You've gone beyond that to charging what you need to make it work for you and to pay you adequately and fairly for your time. How did you overcome that mental challenge of feeling a need to compete with a store, a wholesale type store system? And how did your customers feel about that as well as you built your market?
Yeah, I would say yes and no to what you just said. So when we first started pricing, when we, after we sort of did the couple of experimental years and we got serious about raising pigs, I looked around and figured out, okay, what's the maximum amount anybody is trying to charge in the state and successfully doing it. And I matched that because I knew we were going to try to go for the best of the best of the best. And people always say like, well, know your costs of production and and then set your prices that way. And it's like, okay, yes. And maybe when you're a beginner, you're not doing everything very efficiently and you're at scale, and maybe sure, you can try charging $50 a pound for your pork because maybe as a beginner, that's what it's going to take to make 10 pigs profitable, but no one's going to pay that. And so I figured just know your quality, look for other people who are successfully raising pigs or whatever you're doing in that same quality sort of bracket and see what they're charging and either match that or go above it if you're going to try to take things to the next level. And that helps you get sort of a realistic starting point. And I would say always go higher. If you're super quality if your mindset is all about quality and customer care, then try to go higher because it's easier to drop your prices later. Yeah, if you're going in for like I'm going to be the farmer who cuts corners or, cuts out the fluff, and I'm just going to help people. I hate marketing, and I'm going to be the farmer who helps people fill their freezers for super cheap, and I'm not going to make all that much money doing it. Then sure, that's a different thing. But yeah, I would say that's how we set our prices. And
sure,
it's not paying for the whole farm right now. It pays for, it definitely pays for my time. It definitely pays the mortgages or the mortgage on our farmland, pays off all the expenses that have to do with the pigs, and then pays for investments that we're making into our systems. But we definitely rely on my husband's off-farm income and insurance. And that's another thing. If you have off-farm income, I think people's knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, well, you have off-farm income, you shouldn't charge super premium prices. But there are a lot of people out there who are trying to make a go of it and don't have that flexibility of off-farm income. And my theory is that if you do have that flexibility of off-farm income, that means it's sort of a privilege you need to respect. And sometimes when you don't have any flexibility and you don't have off-farm income, the lever that you can pull to sell more product is just dropping your price. And I figure those of us who do have a partner who works off the farm, we need to be setting, as long as the quality backs it up, we need to be setting our prices really, really correctly. Because other people who don't have the privilege of off-farm income, they can always at least say, well, at least I don't charge as much as Nettle Valley Farm. So I think as farmers, we need to collude a little bit more and hold the line as far as like our prices. We really need to be charging what our product is worth, especially if you have off-farm income, just to make it a little bit easier for the folks out there who don't. It's counterintuitive, but I really feel strongly about that.
That's a really intriguing. It shows how intentional you are about your thought towards all of this, because that's just an interesting way. I mean, it gives the opportunity for, you're not trying to, you have a lot of people who maybe have extra money would say, well, I'm going to go undercut the competition, drive them out of business. But you're saying, because I have extra money, I'm going to charge a higher premium price to give opportunity for people to come in beneath me because I'm not dependent on every sale. Wow. Yeah. That's very intriguing mindset, and just shows how intentional you are about your thought process. Thanks for sharing that, because I never would have considered something like that. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to think about that later. That's fascinating.
I'll probably have a lot of people who argue with me on that, and that's just fine. But that's sort of where I've come to at this point, is that those of us who have the flexibility, it takes a hell of a lot more work to sell pork that's as not expensive, but as valuable as ours. We're charging $6 or $7 a pound hanging weight plus processing plus delivery. And it takes way more time and effort and money to sell that pork. But I can do that because my husband works off the farm. Mm-hmm. So it's my responsibility to do that instead of just being like, oh, fire sale.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you could sell hundreds had you come in at a price point that is much more competitive, but that's just intriguing. No, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. On the business side, I know you talked, Nick maybe does a little bit of the financing and stuff. So I'm just in general, running a business. One question I have when you started, what did you prioritize as far as investments in the farm? Or if someone was starting out, maybe didn't have a building already, what would you prioritize as far as equipment, infrastructure, investments on a limited budget?
Oh, yeah. Well, for my specific context, I'm farming with a chronic illness. Like, I do not have as much energy and resilience as people who have never had Lyme disease. Mm-hmm. So for me, honestly, it was investing in things that help my health and energy and resilience. So for instance, we were hand feeding, it's like hundreds of pounds of feed by hand, mm-hmm. and getting jostled around by pigs. And I was like, okay, we only have 25 pigs. It probably doesn't justify investing in these Osborne wheel feeders. But you know what? I don't have as much energy as other people, so I'm gonna invest in that. And then we probably got a tractor before we absolutely needed to. Mm-hmm. But it has been such a godsend instead of, clearing fence lines with a scythe, which I did before, or a weed whip before, which is what I did before we had a tractor. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it worked out. We got a 5-year loan at 0% interest, and it worked out to be about $30 a day to pay for that tractor. And sure. It's been worth every penny. Yeah. I think there's a lot of pressure among the permaculture, restoration ag, regenerative ag people to do all the earthworks and plant trees and I don't know, do all that stuff first. And I'm sort of more in the Greg Judy camp of just spend the money that you need on fencing, water, really dial in those systems, because you're not going to know where you want to put your earthworks or where you want to plant your trees until later on down the road. Mm-hmm. It's sort of embarrassing, but we've been here for 6 or 7 years now, and I haven't planted a single tree. I've killed a lot of trees intentionally to make more pasture. Mm-hmm. And I'm just now starting to get a feel for, okay, how do we want to do some of these more permanent pond installations or tree planting? Just give yourself some time on that and really just focus on making money and building your customer base and learning how to take care of your customers and take care of your livestock before you worry about some of that other stuff. That's what I'd say. Yeah. Flexible mobile infrastructure.
Yeah. All that. I forget now what Joel Salatin calls it, but it's all about flexible mobile, movable, stuff. But I suck at keeping these podcasts condensed because I'm always intrigued and go off on tangents and go down rabbit trails. But I do want to talk about your incubator farm a bit, what you're doing there, why you're doing it. So I'll just let you share about it and the origin and what it's evolved to and why.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Nick and I, it's important for us to pay it forward. That's a big part of our sort of way of moving through the world. I got incubated when I was a young vegetable farmer down at an incubator farm program that was in Northfield. And that's where I was able to make really important mistakes and learn and try things out in a pretty protected, low cost environment where I didn't have a mortgage payment and I didn't have a tractor payment. And so we knew that when we invested in land, we wanted to get more land and just have a little bit more space than we absolutely needed, so we could sort of pay that experience forward. Also, we're just sort of we like people and like having people around and like learning about other people's enterprises. So we've tried to be clear from the beginning. This is not an apprenticeship. It's not an internship. It's not a job. The folks who come here and incubate really need to have their own vision, their own entrepreneurial spirit, their own ideas, and we'll support in whatever ways we can, like help with marketing. Like we help our incubatees sell their livestock or their meat to our customers. Because, someone who wants to spend money on our pastured pork is likely to want to spend money on forest raised goat or pasture chickens, that sort of thing. That was the idea behind it. The model itself is folks pay quote unquote for the program with doing 4 hours or so a half day of work 3 times a month for half the year. As far as that's the payment for the access to the land, our ranger, I'll help them out with the tractor when they need it. They've got access to our truck and our trailer and just, all of our hand tools and all the equipment like that in our barns. And then also folks can choose to live in our house too. And that's just a separate rental room and board agreement. And yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, this is the end of our third year with our first group of incubatees, and it's been a steep learning curve. I mean, people are tough. Communication is tough, and I think we've done a really good job as a cohort and as a group of working through all the challenges that come with trying to farm and live in more of a community setting. And so I'm really proud of us that we've learned a lot together. And I'm happy to say that both young farmers that are incubating with us are graduating, quote unquote, this year, and both moving on to running their own enterprises on land bases that are close by. And I guess that's another motivation that Nick and I had for running this program, is that just helping other young farmers get started who will then hopefully stay in the area and just keep adding to the really cool local food and farming community that we have here in the Driftless. And yeah, it's great. It's a success. We've got 2 more young farmers now in the area, which feels really good.
Well, that's awesome. And as far as what you're getting for what you're offering, it's very reasonable, very affordable start for some of these folks, which may otherwise have been extremely difficult. So really just awesome model what you're trying to do. And would you recommend that? I mean, is that something that you talked about the challenges a little bit, but is that something you think we need more of, or what are your thoughts on that system?
We absolutely need more of it. I think we need all different types of incubator farms run by all different types of people. I mean, I think like our farm really isn't set up for annual veg production. We don't have the infrastructure. So we need vegetable farm, incubator farm programs. We need people who have thousands of acres or, hundreds of acres. So somebody running cattle can really get started. That's not something that we can support here. And I think there's different kinds of incubator farm programs. Like we have sort of the informed sink or swim. So if you want to come here and start a vegetable farm, I'm going to tell you all the reasons why you really shouldn't. We've got incredible deer pressure and don't have much infrastructure. But if you really want to be here and you like us and you want to do vegetables, like, cool. I'm going to tell you, like I said, all the reasons why you shouldn't do it. But then if you still really want to, I'm going to let you do it and make all of your own mistakes, because that's an important part of the learning process. But other incubator farm programs might take a more sheltered approach of just saying like, no, that's not going to work here. It's not going to be a good fit for us. And that'll, different people with different personalities and characteristics, that'll be a better fit. I will say running an incubator farm program is not for everybody. Like a lot of farmers get into farming because they don't like dealing with people and they don't like communicating and they don't like conflict. And you have to be really willing to just like dig into conflict and emotional issues. Anytime you're working or farming or just working, doesn't even have to be farming, with other people. Like a mentor of mine in the Decorah area says, if you're not in conflict, you're not in community. And you have to have those skills, or at least be willing to really work on those skills to be able to think of systems that keep you communicating well not systems that prevent, there's some systems that prevent conflict, but then systems of how to work through conflict. And you have to be the type that can accept feedback and give feedback. One of the things that's really helped us be more successful is we have an outside of the house program facilitator. Martha McFarland is a bison farmer, and she lives over an hour away from us, but she's been our program facilitator from the beginning, so that whenever we have a struggle within the program about systems or about communication, she's there to be sort of an outside mediating force. And I also think it's really important. She has the ability to tell me to shape up. I think a lot of communal farms or efforts like this fall apart because the person who has all the power, the landowners or the person running the program, doesn't have anyone to tell them to shape up or do something differently or to mediate conflict. And I think that's been a helpful thing. Yeah. I also think it's important that anyone who wants to run an incubator farm program really closely examine whether or not you could really handle somebody on your farm doing something that you know a lot about, because chances are they're going to want to do it differently than you. And I think that's been one of the successful aspects of our farm, is that the two young farmers who've incubated with us have run enterprises that I don't really know anything about. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes that's bit us in the butt because, like, for instance, I'm just like not familiar with, say, biosecurity issues with ruminants. And that sort of bit us in the butt this year with a Yoni's issue. But in many other ways, it's just sort of like, all right, I'm here to talk to you about the things that I do know things about, like marketing and bookkeeping. But other than that, you're free to figure things out. And I'm not tempted to tell them what to do.
No, that's fascinating. And one thing, kind of a theme I've followed, pulling out of everything from your production model to your marketing choices and pricing to your incubator farm, is just intentionality. And maybe that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but it's always been a word that I've found a lot of meaning in, is being intentional about every decision you make. And really, I see that in a lot of what you do, and the directions that you're going is not just, by happenstance. It's very intentional. So if someone was to pull something out of this, there's a lot of good nuggets of wisdom. That's something that I see as a very key and integral part of your success. So we are pushed up on an hour here. And so I want to respect your time and wrap this up soon. But I want to get one question, is if you were starting over, or as you work with somebody who is doing this, or maybe just starting for themselves, any major tips, tricks, things that just as a general for somebody starting this thing that you're doing and down the path of what you've done, that you've gained over the 7 years that you've been doing it?
A few things. If you're like me and you're super impatient and super stubborn, you're going to be tempted to rush to get a farm. Don't rush. Be as patient as you possibly can. Like, our land is wonderful and I love it, and it's super challenging. But I also was just so desperate to get started that, I was just really impatient and probably bought land that, it's just really challenging. So be as patient as you can. I realized that getting land, any land at all, is super hard. So that's why I say as you can. Also, if you're super impatient and stubborn like me, resist the urge to start a farm before working for a bunch of other people who have experience in your enterprise. Like, I've never worked for another pastured hog farmer. And that I think has helped me in some ways, that I've been able to freely just come up with things on my own. Obviously I've leaned on a lot of resources like Facebook pastured pig groups, and I have several really amazing mentors who have helped me out quite a bit. But there's some basics that would have been really helpful for me that I would have picked up just working for other people. And I'm trying to sort of catch up after the fact by woofing all over the country for other farmers, and then, like I said, getting mentors. And don't quit your day job. It is really nice to be able to have that flexibility of cash flow, especially in the early years, to be able to invest in nicer equipment that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do if you didn't have that off-farm cash flow. But I get it. If that's your goal, it's really, really helpful to have that off-farm income in the early years. So I'd say don't be impatient and don't be stubborn like me.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I love it.
It's all worked out, but only with a
Yeah.
lot of luck and support. And yeah.
No, that's great. I love it. And I want to give you a chance to plug your social media, which is awesome. I love following the videos and photos on that. But a couple reminders for our listeners is the YouTube video that I talked about, where she talked a lot more on what she's done for marketing, and actually how I met her in the first place was going out to her farm to do a soil health case study interview and kind of on-farm visit. And so that's available at our website, sfa-mn.org, under the soil health case studies in 2020. So check that out to learn a little bit more, get a different view of kind of what she's doing. But lastly, just, how can people find you and share whatever you'd like for people to take a look at?
For sure. Yeah. We love chatting with other people who are interested about pastured pigs. So our website is nettlevalleyfarm.com. And then we're also on Instagram and Facebook. You can either follow me personally, that's Grow, Gather, Graze on Instagram, or then our farm page is just Nettle Valley Farm on Instagram, and then on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome.
For the farm, both things. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dayna. I really appreciate your time today and just talking about what you do, which is awesome.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Dirt Rich is produced by the Sustainable Farming Association. We believe that agriculture, done well, heals. For more resources or to tap into the Farmer to Farmer Network, visit us at sfa-mn.org.